what's up, Slunts Joker here, and welcome to my video on my 980s in SLI. I'm going to be taking a look at those in comparison against the newly released Titan X from Nvidia. Now, I know I said recently that I wasn't going to be getting 980s, I was going to be sticking with my 780s until the next generation at least, or until Pascal was released from Nvidia. But recently I sold my HTPC build, which if you saw the couple of videos I did on that, I wound up selling that build to a friend, and then he wanted to get my 780s as well. So it just made sense for me to go ahead and grab the 980s, because I still had a little bit of money left at the end of the day, so I didn't have to come out of pocket at all for the 980s. And also I thought it would serve as some pretty good content for you guys, as I know a lot of people were saying, why don't you have 980s? So now I got the 980s, which is just going to help me more in the future, as I'm going to be getting the 1440 ROG Swift monitor pretty soon, and a 4K secondary screen I've also got my eye on, which is going to be for like video editing and color correction work, because it's going to be a 4K IPS panel, so I have a little bit better of a screen for video editing and all that sort of stuff, and workflow things as well. Now, I wanted to do a comparison between the 980s in SLI versus the Titan X, for a couple of reasons, but mainly because 1440 and 4K gaming has now definitely moved sort of into the mainstream. Even though the majority of gamers on the PC are still gaming at 1080p, 1440 and 4K has definitely become more mainstream. It's starting to become a lot more prevalent in the marketplace, and GPUs are starting to be put out specifically to meet that necessity that gamers are asking for. You're seeing it with things like the Titan X with a 12 gigabyte frame buffer, which is just absolutely insane. So, I mean, I wouldn't go for that card unless you're running like Skyrim with mods at 4K and like ridiculous stuff like that. And 980s and SLI, definitely overkill for 1080p gaming. I can tell you that running it right now on my VG248QE, that's a 1080p 144Hz monitor with the G-Sync installed. It's absolute overkill for 1080p gaming. In Battlefield 4, getting like 180, 200 frames, or I should say hardline, since that's a little bit newer, but it's the same frame rate in hardline. So just getting absolutely ridiculous, disgusting frames at 1080p, which is why I'm going 1440 with the ROG Swift, and it should look absolutely amazing. Can't wait to get my hands on that. Taking a look at the specs of the 980s, you can see they got 2,048 CUDA cores out of the box for a combined 4,096, which is going up against the Titan X's 3,072 CUDA cores. The Titan X does come out of the box at a slower core clock of 1,000 megahertz versus the 980's 1127 on the reference design. Obviously, you can buy aftermarket cards that have a higher boost than that, but I got the reference cards because I can just overclock them myself, which I would advise most people to do. I wouldn't advise anyone to really spend extra money on a factory overclock card, because the overclocks they put on those cards is so small and minimal, and something you can literally do for yourself in like 5 seconds. Just download Afterburner or Precision X or whatever your favorite overclocking utility is for graphics cards, and just go ahead and put on that factory overclock, or even beyond that, because it's so minute, the overclock that they put on those things out of the box, it's ridiculous. So there's no point in spending extra on a factory overclock card. Pick the card that suits your needs best for the different cooling designs, and I'm going to get into that in a minute with why I chose reference. But looking at the memory clock, both cards have a 7012 effective clock out of the box on the memory, but both should be able to overclock fairly well with a better thermal efficiency on the Maxwell architecture, with the 980s taking the edge on that, as they do have 165 watt TDP, while the Titan X has a 250 watt TDP. And then finally, the memory bus is the last stat we want to look at, with the 980s having a 256-bit memory bus and the Titan X having a 384-bit memory bus. Alright, so besides the out-of-the-box specs of the Titan X and the 980s in SLI, obviously price is going to be a big concern for people, as the Titan X is demanding a hefty price tag of $1,000 for a single GPU solution. And if that's going to, is that going to be enough for 4K gaming? We'll answer that in a minute when we look at the benchmarks. And then we've got the 980s, which combined, if you get aftermarket cards right now, they're about $550 each. So you're looking at $1,100 before taxes. But if you go with the reference models, which are getting a little bit more scarce as it's later in the development cycle of the chipset for the 980s, you're actually going to have to pay a little bit more, like I did. I had to pay $600 per card, plus taxes, shipping, all that stuff. Grand total came in around $1,250, somewhere in there. So I definitely paid a premium to get the reference design, and I'll tell you why I did that now. All right, so obviously looking at the Titan X, you only have one choice really. It's just the one card, and it's the reference cooler design, which some people you might love it, you might hate it. Previously, I was on the fence about it, but I've started to come around to the idea of reference cards, which is why I went with reference cards. I like the look of them overall; they're absolutely fantastic. The build quality on them is amazing. They got a nice backplate on there, and that aluminum shroud with the polycarbonate window. I just think it's an absolutely beautiful card, and I've definitely changed my opinions on them over I would say the last 6 months or so, as far as seeing performance numbers and temperatures and things like that, in regards to the rest of the system. Because with running with reference cards, what's going to happen is your temperatures on the graphics cards are going to be a little bit warmer, but the rest of your system is actually going to run cooler and quieter, since the blower cooler design actually takes in the hot air from your case and then expels it out the back of the case. Now this, like I said, this is going to result in your GPUs running a little bit warmer, but I'm not concerned about it because my top card is not going over 80 degrees with the overclock at 100% load at any given time. However, once looking at my CPU now, even when the graphics cards aren't running at load, like when I'm rendering in Vegas and my CPU's at full load, I've noticed a drop in my CPU temperature by about 15 degrees, going from my MSI 780s that had the twin Frozer fans versus the now 980s with the reference design, and I credit that hugely just to the fact that I'm now using the blower design cooler, and it's helping to pull all of that hot air out of the case much better than the 780s would, which were just blowing out hot air into the case, and it wasn't really getting out all that well because I am using a Define R5, which is sealed up pretty much all the way around, apart from the two intake fans at the front and the one exhaust at the back, since I have opted to leave the Moduvent covers on at the top to help reduce noise, which is very particular to my needs, as I need silence when I'm recording, podcasting, streaming, things like that, as I do have a fairly sensitive mic, and I don't want to pick up the computer in the background and have to remove it in post, as it's always better policy to try to remove noise at the source if at all possible. Alright guys, so now that we've talked about the price, we've talked about the specs, the design, the coolers on the cards, all of that good stuff, I want to go now and take a look at the benchmarks, which are probably the most important factor when you're looking to buy a graphics card, is how it's going to perform for your specific set of workflow or gaming needs. Are you going to be doing 1440? Are you going to be doing 4K? And going into this, I really wasn't sure what was going to be the winner, especially at 4K. At 1440, I was almost 100% sure that the 980s and SLI would dominate the Titan X in terms of just sheer performance, because it's just got more raw power there, having two graphics cards, as long as you're looking at a game or something that is actually going to use SLI in the way that it should be. And then for 4K, I was really on the fence. I didn't know if the extra CUDA cores were going to matter for the 980s and SLI combined for the 4096 CUDA cores, or was the Titan X really going to pull ahead, since it has that 12 gigabyte frame buffer and the 384-bit memory bus, especially when looking at games like Shadow of Mordor, that's reported to require 6 gigabytes of video memory when you're using the Ultra Texture Pack. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the benchmarks. On the only synthetic benchmark that I ran, which was Firestrike, which I ran at Extreme and Ultra here, you could see the 980s and SLI pulled well ahead of the Titan X, which was benchmarked by Anantech. They used a nearly identically spec system with a 6-core Intel processor and 16 gigabytes of RAM. I don't have a Titan X, unfortunately, so I had to pull my data for the Titan X from them. But I looked around to try to find a review source that was reliable and also used a system that was closely spec'd to my system as possible. And with that, I landed on Anantech. So looking at the Firestrike Extreme benchmark, you can see the 980s got a score of 11,997, while the Titan X pulled in a score of 7,663. Now, this was overclocked. My 980s were overclocked by plus 225 on the core and plus 250 on the memory, with a plus 10 voltage and 120% power limit. The Titan X was also overclocked. You'll have to check my written review out, which has the full specs on the Titan X from Anantech and their overclock, which they use for the benchmarks. There's going to be a link down in the description below to where you can go ahead and check out that article over at Top 10 Gamer that I wrote over the weekend. So if you guys want, all the full specs and benchmarks, you want to go look at it on there, you can go ahead and check that out. But like I said, the Titan X only pulled in a 7,663 score compared against the 980s at 11,997, which is kind of what I expected for 1440. But now switching over to 4K, I was really surprised looking at the 980s and SLIs. They got a 5,890, and the Titan X got 4,033. So on paper here, looking at least this one synthetic benchmark, you can see that the 980s and SLI are pulling ahead of the Titan X, even in 4K gaming. So it begs the question, how much of that 12 gigabyte frame buffer is actually getting used? I don't think this particular benchmark uses a ton of video memory. So let's go ahead and take a look at something like Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of Mordor at 1440, the 980s and SLI, once again pulling well ahead of the Titan X at 114 by 0.84 versus 86.6 on the Titan X. And then moving up to 4K, the 980s and SLI pulling in 57.14 average frames per second against the Titan X's 48.9 average frames per second. So you can see that gap getting a little bit closer when you move over to 4K gaming, for sure. It's definitely closing the gap, but the 980s are still pulling well ahead of the Titan X, in terms of just average frames per second. So if you are, looking to do 4K gaming, then it's definitely worth considering doing 980s and SLI over a single Titan X, because I still think that for 4K gaming, proper 4K gaming, if you're wanting to play at Ultra, which obviously if you're at that price bracket of looking at Titan X's to begin with, you're probably wanting to play games at Ultra with like anti-aliasing off. So I think the 980s and SLI at around $1,100 to $1,300, depending, with taxes and shipping. I think that's a better price point right now for those versus a single Titan X, because I still think you would need two Titan X's for Ultra settings on most games. I do have a few more benchmarks here, so let's go ahead and roll through those now quickly, just like I did back in the old days on my old school graphics card reviews, and take a look at those fucking rockin' benchmarks. Alright, so I hope you guys did enjoy the rockin' benchmarks. It's definitely been a while since I've done that. Ever since I got the 780s, basically. That was the last time I had to go through the rockin' benchmarks. So if you've been watching me for that long, good on you. But it's been quite a while. But looking at the benchmarks, you could see that the 980s pulled ahead in every scenario that I ran in 1440 and 4K gaming across all of the games, and the synthetic benchmark that I ran, the Firestrike. So, right now, I still stand by that opinion that the 980s and SLI versus one Titan X is going to be the better choice for 4K gaming, at least for now. But it's going to be interesting to see how that same landscape looks in about 6 months or a year from now, if that 4 gigabytes of video memory is going to be getting pushed even further by games like The Witcher 3 coming out and Star Wars Battlefront and other new games, that we're going to see announced at E3. And once we have a better idea of what the gaming landscape is going to look like towards the end of 2015, as more graphically demanding games are going to probably be getting pushed out, with Unreal Engine 4, coming out soon, and games being put out on that. So really not too sure about how it's going to look in a year from now, but right now, at least, the 980s and SLI look like they are beating out a single Titan X. So if you're looking to do 4K gaming, once again, 980s and SLI, Titan X's and SLI is looking like the area where you're pretty much going to have to be if you're wanting to play games at Ultra. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. If you have any questions or comments, please do leave them down below. Don't forget to check the description for links to where you can get the 980s or the Titan X over on Amazon, which helped me out and support me a lot. And also, I've got a link to the article which I mentioned over at Top 10 Gamer, which is gonna have the benchmarks all in detail and all of the specs and everything. If you just want to read it and see what I had to say about these cards in a little bit more detail, you guys can go ahead and check that out there. But that's going to wrap it up, guys. Thanks again. I'll catch you next time. Ta-ra!